Hello everyone, this is our Inside Finance television production. I am Ruth Roberts. Inside Finance is a TV program that enables us to make it easier for you, the general public, to understand the intricate details of the ministry's functions and services. It's about what we do, who we are, and how we interact with you, the general public. Inside Finance, an inside look into the nation's business. Do you know that alcohol use is the leading factor for disease that have been linked to numerous negative health effects and social outcomes, including more than 200 diseases and injury conditions such as cancer, stroke, and liver cirrhosis, among others? Now you know. Please don't go away. We will be right back.
Drink Driver 2.
Game over. Drink driving is not a game.
A message from the National Disaster Management Agency, NADMA.
Welcome back. This is our Inside Finance television production, an inside look into the nation's business. Today we are talking about alcohol, the effects, negative and otherwise, of alcohol. And with me in the studio, no stranger to our Inside Finance television production, in fact, to the television fraternity here in Grenada, Dr. Francis Martin. He needs no introduction. Dr. Martin, welcome to Inside Finance television production. It's always a pleasure having you. By the end of our conversation, we have really been totally educated. So thanks for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us.
I'm usually very happy to be part of the programs.
Yeah, because I know for you, education is a big part of the whole. It's not just about being a doctor, but ensuring that persons have the information that they need to keep themselves well. Right. So today we're talking about alcohol. Just for, by virtue of us just starting from scratch, just give us a sense of what is alcohol.
Well, alcohol is a substance that is produced naturally in nature, as well as a substance that can be produced in a lab. But basically, it's the byproduct of fermentation of sugars. So any type of sugar even if sugar that is left on its own, like you make juice in the day and you leave it up to the atmosphere, the oxygen in the atmosphere will ferment the sugar in the juice that you've made. And if you make a cup of juice in the morning, leave it out on the counter, by the time you get home in the afternoon, there's about 0.5% alcohol in that juice already.
Really?
So it's...
For those of us who say we don't drink,
yes.
we do drink.
So it happens naturally in nature. There are some fruits that when they're ripe, they ferment. And we have history, we have examples of monkeys who like a particular fruit. I don't remember the name of that fruit, but there's some monkeys who like the particular fruit because when it ferments, they use the fruit and they enjoy the effects of alcohol. And so these monkeys tend to love these fruits.
Wow.
So it does happen naturally in an environment. But on the more decisive purposes, it's sugars that we use, and in our society we use a lot of cane sugars for that, but you can also use other fruits. You boil them and ferment them, or even if you don't ferment them, you can actually boil the cane sugar to the extent that you can actually distill out alcohol. So alcohol is that substance that comes out of fermentation of of glucose or sugars.
So what happens to the body? What they say biological effects. What when the alcohol enters into the body? What happens? Give us a sense of the physiological acceptance.
Well, another thing to set the stage is that alcohol, or the alcohol molecule, so to speak, is not a bad thing, because the human body does have alcohol molecules in it. And alcohol molecules are used for a lot of different things. So, for example, in medicine, a lot of cold medicines, a lot of medication that are used to treat people, sometimes the pharmaceutical companies and the pharmacists and they found a way to attach that compound to an alcohol molecule, because an alcohol can enter into the body real quickly. So these are kind of what you term the better use of alcohol compounds, because they do help medicine. Let's say cold medicines, for example. Alcohol gets absorbed into your body from the time it enters into your mouth, as opposed to other types of food that has to go through your stomach to be metabolized, go through your intestine.
I guess you preempted that question I was coming with.
Right. But I guess for the purposes of this particular question, as you're speaking about the regular alcohol that people consume, when a human consumes alcohol, as I indicated earlier, from the time it enters into your mouth, your body starts to absorb that alcohol. And then it gets into your stomach, more absorption takes place, and gets into your small intestine, more absorption takes place. Then this alcohol gets into your bloodstream. Your blood carries that alcohol to the place that can't wait to get that alcohol and metabolize it, and that's called your liver. Your liver absolutely grabs onto alcohol. There's a site on the liver called the P450 system. That site is a site that alcohol is used to, it breaks down alcohol into the components that leads to whatever we feel. So alcohol gets into your mouth, it gets into your bloodstream, your blood takes it to your liver, and then your liver starts breaking down that alcohol using a particular enzyme that we call alcohol dehydrogenase. That's the name of the enzyme. And it breaks it down to a substance called acetaldehyde. Now, acetaldehyde is a word that I want you to remember. It's not because you're a scientist or a biologist or a chemist. It's a word that all alcohol users should know. Just as how I say diabetes should know their blood sugar, and men should know their prostate level.
You have to put that in there, right? Very well, we go with
alcohol users should know their acetaldehyde,
Okay.
because that is what gives you the sensation of all that happens in your body. And under normal circumstances, your body will try to break down that acetaldehyde into carbon dioxide and water and so on, using another hormone called glutathione, and we're going to talk about that because that has a nutritional aspect of things. But the breakdown of acetaldehyde does not happen as quickly as it should, because the body runs out of that glutathione, which is used to break down that alcohol. If we had a ton of glutathione in our bodies, a never-ending supply of glutathione in our bodies, it will always be there to break down the acetaldehyde, and so you wouldn't feel the effects of alcohol at all, because that glutathione is there, constantly break it down. But the glutathione runs out, and because it runs out, the acetaldehyde remains in the body. And that's what gives you all the effects. And I guess the rest of the conversation will be, what is this thing doing in every different part of your body?
Right.
And that's what the conversation is going to be.
And I'm thinking about it, even as you're talking about, we want to discuss the too much of it and how it affects. But let's just talk a little bit about, because it's occurring naturally. I mean, I assume that it has some good benefits for the body. So what are some of the good benefits of alcohol?
Yes, like I say, the body uses alcohol molecules in many different forms and ways for its own physiological functions, for enzyme to functions, for molecules to go across the cell membranes, for things to be made. Alcohol molecules are used in different biochemical substances in our bodies, and to a large extent, very small amounts of alcohol as well has the ability to relax your bloodstream and help your blood pressure to drop. It gives you this relaxed feeling kind of thing. So these are some of the positive feeling that causes positive thinking, positive hormones to be secreted. You will feel warm and nice and so on, and that level of alcohol, the body has a natural way of getting it anyway. So you don't even have to take it in.
Right.
Because as I said, by drinking sugar and by drinking juice, that's one of the ways your body gets this natural supply of the oxygen of the alcohol that it needs to help you to feel better, to make your blood pressure drops a little bit, and also, as I said, to help some of the physiological functions to happen in our bodies.
Okay, so what makes the individual drunk by using alcohol? I just need that question in there before I continue.
Well, what makes them drunk is, you remember I said acetaldehyde?
Right.
Don't forget that word.
Right. But we go back to it.
Because it is not the alcohol in its sense that makes you drunk. When you drink the beer and you drink the rum, when the rum gets into your bloodstream and the alcohol gets into your liver, it breaks down to acetaldehyde. And that's what does the work for you, is not the alcohol itself. It begins the process of breaking down. And so that acetaldehyde goes into all over your body and causes all kind of problems. But you were asking about being drunk. So I want you to think of the brain as being an organ that's up there. I wonder if there's something I can use to represent what the brain looks like. It's like when you cook macaroni together and you don't stir it and all the stick together. That's like how the brain is. And when you squish it,
right,
it's similar consistency.
Okay.
Right? So when you drink, first of all, the alcohol or the acetaldehyde, as we say, or the effects of the alcohol, it washes over the top part of your brain first. That's the part of the brain that, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of the brain. That is the part that is responsible for helping you to be sociable, helping you to talk and relax, takes away the fear. And this is why when people start to drink, the first thing that happens, they become very relaxed.
Right.
And those who are very fearful about social situation, you become less anxious. And me and that men's health passion for the men who are afraid to speak to the girls by having the alcohol.
Take a shot. Okay.
And it does. And you should stop there. But if you don't stop there and you keep drinking, more of the acetaldehyde is there. So it starts soaking deeper into the brain and deeper into the brain. And it goes from the top of the brain, which is the cortex of the brain, into the inside of the brain, where it starts affecting emotions and feelings and thinking. So that person's emotions starts getting a bit labile. And when I say labile, the emotions start changing. So if that person was naturally an angry person who had some anger and vexation inside of them, suddenly they figure the alcohol is now making them able to express that feeling because it's not repressed anymore. And those who had feelings of love and care and didn't know how to say it to someone, they get a chance to say it.
Right.
Because it caused the emotions to get very labile, because the alcohol has now sunken deeper into the middle part of the brain, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for emotions and memory and feelings and all this kind of things. And so this is why alcohol brings out. And that's one reason why the parents used to say, don't let drunk people use alcohol to cover up their problems. It is because they wanted to do that anyway, right? Now you should stop drink there.
Right.
But if you still continue,
okay, going deeper.
but if you still continue, then again, that acetaldehyde causing problems, it goes into another part of the brain called the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is the back of the brain. That part of the brain is responsible for balance. And when it gets there, then that balance center in your brain starts getting into issues. There's another part of the body as well called the semicircular canals, which is inside the ear. Now, most of us know our ears is responsible for hearing, but not many of us remember the ears is also responsible for balance. Yeah. So the alcohol sneaks into that area of the brain called the cerebellum and the semicircular canals, and that's what leads to the sway and the drunkenness, and you can't. So you just imagine, you're very labile, you're talking all kinds of things because of the alcohol, and on top of that, you're swaying all over the place, and that's if you continue to drink. Now, you should stop there. But if you don't stop, now most people, they eventually have to stop there because they fall and they get really drunk and they block a drain, or somebody decides to take them and bring them home.
Right.
So that time you need help if you can't. But some people somehow find a way to still keep drinking after that. Worse yet, if they had taken caffeine with it, like the what's it called? Those drinks?
Power drinks.
With alcohol, with caffeine in it. You should stop there. But if you don't stop there and you keep drinking, then the alcohol sinks lower down into the brain, called the brain stem. Remember, it starts in the cortex, laughing, happy, jolly. Then it came over happy. Then it came down to the emotional part of the brain. You either cry, you say you love whatever. Then it goes on to the other part that deals with movement. You get drunk and you move. And if you still keep drinking, it goes on to the brain stem. Now guess what? The brain stem is where the center that is responsible for heart rate and breathing.
Wow.
So if you allow it to go down there, that's when you die. Because the heart stops beating and the breathing stops.
Oh, whoa, that's why some people from binging or stuff like that, they can actually die.
They can actually die. We've had examples of that here in Grenada where people drank right up until they die.
Ooh.
As a matter of fact, when I was in Trinidad doing, I think it was my practicum, we had a famous story, and I can't say because I don't want to give anything out, but a very popular son was brought home by friends because they went binge drinking that night, and next morning the child didn't wake up because the child drank too much and the alcohol just went way down to the brain stem, and that was it.
So I think about it as this being one episode, right? And let's say they stop before they die, which they usually do.
Right.
But what happens when you have prolonged use of alcohol to that degree?
Right, that is considered chronic alcoholism because it may not be chronic binging, but chronic alcoholism. If you continue to drink over the years without actually getting to the point of dying, but you get to the point of being drunken or not be able to, then this constant exposure of your brain to all of this acetaldehyde and the breakdown products of it, that in itself has some very significant effects both in the brain and in the liver. We could just use those two as an example now. In the brain, it interferes with what is called the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. This is basically the hormonal axis that causes the brain to function. So these hormones, the pituitary hormones, the thyroid gland hormones, these are the hormones that makes you do everything that happens in your life.
Right.
And these hormones are responsible for so many bodily functions. So for example, in females, these hormones are responsible for making your period come, making you successfully have a pregnancy, make you breastfeed your baby if you need to. And for men, these hormones are responsible for the manliness of us, the building of testosterone, the making of sperm. And so these hormones get severely affected, and that's why alcohol can interfere with the sexual and reproductive health of people. So that's one effects of the constant use. One of the second effects of the constant use is that the acetaldehyde or the alcohol continually to interfere with the nerves themselves within the brain that makes the brain work. And if you think of the nerves in the brain, think of the nerve as an electrical wire.
Right.
The electrical wire has the wire inside of it, and outside of the wire there is the insulation.
Right.
All of our nerves in our body is like that. The insulation in the electrical wire in the brain is called the myelin sheath. That's what protects the nerve from shorting out, if you want to put it that way. Alcohol interferes with that conductivity. Alcohol interferes with that shield, that protective shield that is around the nerves. And for constant use, that can cause the brain to start malfunctioning. And the malfunction comes by loss of cognition. Your thinking power goes, you think slower, you take longer time to remember things.
Right.
And eventually, as years and years go by, it can dwindle all the way down to become dementia, if you want to put it that way. And then in the liver part of things, because alcohol damages the hormones in the liver itself, the liver tries to repair itself so many times that it doesn't really function. So the liver starts getting a bit bigger. and it's actually called fatty liver. And that fatty liver can also later on lead to liver cirrhosis. There's one other thing that happens in the liver with alcohol, and that is from the glucose part of alcohol, the sugar part of alcohol. The liver breaks it down into free fatty acids, and that fatty acids can lead to fatty liver as well as lead to increased fat in humans if you continue to drink. And that's why a lot of people who drink eventually put on weight, especially around the abdomen region.
Oh, okay. I see that a lot, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at persons who start to drink alcohol at a very early age.
Yeah.
And in fact, the culture seems to accommodate alcohol some way or the other. When it's Christmas time, when it's school sports or whatever function, we find there is always some measure of alcohol. All
Yeah.
people seem not to be able to have a party or a get together without alcohol. But what happens when persons start using alcohol at a very early age? How dangerous is this?
Well, at an early age, the alcohol gets right into and interferes with the normal developmental process that's supposed to happen in an early adult life. Whether people already understand it, but just to reiterate,
Right.
it is hormones that make us grow.
Right.
And the hormones are made in our liver, and the hormones cause different things to happen in different parts of our bodies. So, for example, the teenager boy and girl, the hormones causes the bones to lengthen so they get taller. During adolescence, from adolescent to 17 years of old, from about 8, 9 to 17, both boy and girl, they lengthen, and that's how they get tall. Because the first thing that grows in us is our long bones, not the short bones, the long ones. So from 9 years old until you're 17 years old, the long bones starts to grow. That is these bones here, these here, this, your thighs, your so on, and your spinal column. That's all that grows. So you lengthen and you get very thin. And guys, teenager boys get very thin, but you just lengthened. At 17, you stop lengthening. So the height you have at 17 is the height you're going to keep for the rest of your
Hopefully you pass 5 feet, otherwise that's
Hopefully.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, no. After 17, the long bone stops growing, and then you start to put on size. So guys will now start to put on muscles, and ladies and girls start to put on hips and thighs, and chest comes out and everything comes out. And I think that's one reason why boys are so clumsy during that age, because their skull expands much more than the brain is going along with it.
Right.
So the brains in these little boys squish around inside that skull so much because the skull is expanding.
Oh, right. It's
And
okay.
So these boys at the age become very clumsy. They fall easily. It's an
Wow.
interesting thing.
Yeah.
But what causes that to happen is the hormones. Remember, I spoke about the hypothalamo-pituitary axis, which is the concentration of hormones from the brain, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland in the neck, the adrenal gland over the kidneys, and the ovaries. And in boys, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, the adrenal gland over the kidney, and the testes in boys. These hormones have very specific concentration that the body must have in line, and that's why physiologically it's called an axis. If anything goes off the axis, something goes wrong. So, and this is why sometimes girls miss their period if something goes wrong on the axis. Now, alcohol has a direct impact on those hormones. I don't know how else to say it. It's a direct impact. So the alcohol interferes with the normal bodily function and development of a teenage boy and girl.
Whoa, that's interesting. And it's scary to think. I mean, in your experience, do we have a problem with alcohol, over consumption of alcohol here in Grenada, especially among young people?
Yes.
When we were growing up, we think about a drunk person as being an old man,
Right.
some
Right.
adults, but almost
Yeah.
never young people.
Yeah, I am privileged to have had 20 years of clinical experience. So I speak from that experience. So vividly recall my days in the ER in the General Hospital in the early 2000s and making joke about alcohol-related injuries that I've seen during Carnival and Christmas. And then as the years goes by, I have started to see more and more of alcohol-related injuries in the younger and younger populations. Even as young as seeing alcohol-related issues in children as young as 9 and 7 in a certain extent. So I've had that privilege of seeing the increased consumption of alcohol in the younger population as we grow older. So I can tell you from my own personal experience that the alcohol consumption use is increasing. But on top of that, I've also was privileged to have an administrative experience as well when I used to work as a public servant and having the ability to look at the data. And so the data that I have seen also proves what I have, I mean, a couple weeks ago, I presented that data in a forum in St. Andrews, where I showed the increased use of first-time alcoholics constantly increasing over the last 10 years or so. And in all other chronic disease, men are much worse off than women, including alcohol. The concentration and use of alcohol is increasing still in the male population compared to the female population.
When it comes to alcohol and I remember some years ago I had a coworker who would come to work almost always on the weekend and said, "Oh, I had 15 beers," or "I had, whatever number of beers," and in my mind I couldn't understand how someone can have 10, 15 beers and not get drunk. So give us a sense of what happens. And years later, he actually became an alcoholic.
Right, and that's the telltale sign of the alcoholics. Unfortunately, society has made it acceptable. And in some cases, the more you drink, the more you can boast.
Yes, mannish.
Yes, I think the term they use is hegemony or something like that, Right. So guys will come and say, I beat it this weekend, I take a load. Yes. And then society worships that kind of thing, and so much so that if you don't sing alcohol, you don't make any way. So soca, for example, it has to be alcohol.
Some kind of rum, decent.
Yeah, if it is not, then that person doesn't get the crown. So even the way we reward our society has to look internally and see what it is they're doing, because of course these are all happened because of societal issues. But the issue why this is always going to be of concern is because alcohol is addictive.
Right.
It is addictive. And it is addictive simply because there is tolerance and there is because in other words, when you start to drink, your body can tolerate X amount of alcohol. But as you drink, your body gets to tolerate X plus Y. And you keep drinking, it tolerates X plus Y plus Z. So the fact that this alcohol, that a human can take more and more and more to get the same effect, that leads to addiction. And when it gets to addiction, then your society really and truly has no choice. But they have to carry on. And I think this is probably why we have seen that increased use. It is because of the addictive powers within it.
It's a good time for us to take a break. I love the where the conversation is going, viewers and listeners. This is our Inside Finance television production and Inside Look into the Nation's Business, and we have a serious conversation going on with Dr. Francis Martin. We're talking about alcohol, and there are some things that you need to know about alcohol that will probably encourage you probably not to drink at all, or maybe not to drink so much. But if you stay with us, we have much more for you. Please don't go away. We will be right back. Hello, viewers. This is our Inside Finance television production and inside look into the nation's business. I'm Ruth Roberts, and today we are talking about alcohol. I have with me in the studio, just in case you've just joined us, Dr. Francis Martin, and he is really helping us to understand this whole issue about alcohol that we sometimes think about as a social, something that we just enjoy. Yet we are looking at the effects that alcohol can have, not only on our body but on our health. And so, Dr. Martin, it's really, you're making all my brain cells become awake, because as we look at alcohol, we look at it simply as just drinking rum or beer or just having a good time. But when it comes to alcohol, especially in men's health, we have to start talking a little bit more, because in a way we're losing our men to alcohol. While they're outside having a good time, wives and children are really having the negative effects. And not only that, some of them drink themselves into a stupor and forget that they have responsibility at home. And I was talking to a young man some time ago, and he said, Pastor, I really want to stop drinking the alcohol, because like every time I say I'm not going to drink, and my friends and the rest of them, they just say, they come, boy, come and take a drink, boy. And he said, I started to take one and two, and by the time I'm finished, I have no money. And he became very, very much overwhelmed. He was literally crying when he was telling me that, because he's like, he wanted to stop, and he doesn't want to go to the shop. Then if he doesn't go, they say, boy, you're weak, boy, something. You have those social pressures. So let's talk a little bit about alcohol and men's health, because in a way I know a lot of the persons might want the enjoyment, but they don't understand the effects that it can have on the body.
It's rather unfortunate you have had that experience, because it's real. And it is real because, as I indicated, alcohol is addictive. The physiological pathway that goes through the liver, that alcohol is an addictive pathway. So that person's experience is actually for real. So that person needs help in order to get through with that kind of thing. The social aspect of it is well seen in our society as to the effects that alcohol can have on families and the person's personal experience and other things as well. But men in particular, we have an interesting relationship with alcohol. I think historically and from the plantation standpoint, slavery has done its part on us as men as it comes to alcohol, and that's a separate discussion another time that I wish to engage in as well. But the plantation situation still exists as it is right now in our society, and so alcohol has stemmed from that. But coming closer to us as men and what alcohol does for us, when we drink alcohol, as I said, it goes to the bloodstream, goes to the liver starts breaking it down using alcohol dehydrogenase into acetaldehyde. In our liver, the glucose or the sugar part of the alcohol is broken down into fatty acids. And fatty acids are fats, really. So first of all, it makes us as men put on fats. And the liver tries to get rid of the fats by carrying it out into our bodies, and it carries it out using what we call very low density lipoproteins, or LDLs, as you might heard people talk about LDLs in the cholesterol. And triglycerides, those are two major ones that has to do with men. And for some, for obvious reasons, Caribbean men tend to have high triglycerides as well as high LDLs, or low density lipoproteins. And that's simply because Caribbean men like to use lots of alcohol. So we have high triglycerides as a result of the alcohol. And also because we like to use so much shellfish and so much of all this kind of things, we tend to have those high triglyceride levels. But alcohol interferes with manliness by, first of all, interfering with some of the minerals that we were supposed to absorb to build our testosterone in the first place. So alcohol interferes with that absorption. And then you remember earlier I was talking about the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, testes axis?
Yes.
Well, the major hormone that alcohol attaches itself really to is your testosterone. So the alcohol really does prevent good building of testosterone levels. So you could imagine a young teenager who is beginning to get into his life where his testosterone has to bring him and tide him over from being a child to a young boy getting involved in alcohol. That interferes with that testosterone. But even if you save him during that time and he doesn't drink the alcohol, by the time he hits his 30 and 40, when you need your testosterone again to tide you over into a good life as an adult and an elderly man, alcohol gets right in there and interfere with the formation and production and use of your testosterone level. So in other words, alcohol is a direct villain when it comes to your manhood. But we may not know that, because when you start to drink earlier, it gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of pride, a sense of manliness when you drink at first. So it gives you that false sense that you're okay and that you can handle your liquor. But if you continue to drink for long enough, it turns around and bites you in the backside as a result of that. There's one other thing. Girls were born with all the eggs they will ever need in their entire lives. And every month one comes out from the freezer and comes out as a period. Boys were not born with sperm. Boys learn how to make sperm during adolescence. Testosterone and other androgens helps them to make sperm. Sperm is like a tadpole. It has a head and it has a tail. And so the quality of a man's sperm is based on the shape and size of its head and the shape and size of the tail.
Right.
The head have a little thing inside it called the nucleus. The tail just has something called centromere. The centromere is just the thing that makes the tail wiggle.
Right.
Alcohol interferes with the wiggling part of the sperm. And so when men drink alcohol, apart from the other physiological issue we will not get into that has to do with the cellular structure and so on of the sperm, alcohol interferes with the centromere or the tail-like fat part of the sperm, and it makes the sperm drunk. So in order for the sperm, for sperm to fertilize an egg, a sperm must swim in an exact straight line. Any sperm that swims to the side can never get into an egg. Any sperm that swims around in circles, and I think that's where the term going around in circles come from. Okay. It would never fertilize an egg. Alcohol causes the sperm to lose its balance. So the sperm swims all over the place because it's drunk. This is a direct relationship to your ability to fertilize an egg. So in other words, guys, alcohol affects your manhood in much more way than you ever anticipated.
And the thing is, I'm going back to the deception, because I if you want to compare alcohol to, say, another dangerous drug, it is as if when you have that drug for the first time, you go to a certain plateau where you get shot into some kind of euphoria, wonderful feeling, and then you continue to take that drug, trying to get to that same dimension, which is more or less elusive. Yes. So it makes you feel as if you have something, you're man, you're up, and I am the man in the house, so to speak. And then it tricks you into that feeling, when in truth and in fact it's actually taking the manhood away from you. Oh, absolutely. Dr. Martin, I think you alone, I could get that could only come from you, honestly. Yeah, I want to stay on this a little bit longer, because I think even for young people and men alike, because if persons are not involved or don't want to participate, you go to a social function and you want to take water, you want to take malt, they call you a girl, or they say, well, you're weak, or wow, come on, take a drink, boy, you kind of person you're big, So I want to just talk a little bit about, you're a man yourself, and let's just talk a little bit so we can help somebody understand. And the fact is not just about having alcohol, but having such an excess that everything happens quickly. Right.
Yeah, again, it's unfortunate that we're having this discussion because there are stages of these things. The best advice to a young boy is not to start, and don't feel bad about starting, because the longer you stay away from that is best for you. but society has made this beast where everybody seems to feel that you ought to, and so on. And it's really hard for those young persons who are exposed to this, and even for the men now who are struggling with trying to get out of it. There is no easy answer to this, except sometimes I get angry within myself for why have our society gotten to that extent that is causing this to happen. I mean, I had a period of experience once when in being the ER, I noticed that all alcohol-related injuries that came in, there was a certain behavioral pattern of some of the alcohol injuries that came in. And I started looking at it as a joke at first, but after a while, while speaking with the nurses, we were able to start predicting, that person must have drank this particular alcohol because that's the way they're behaving. We don't find those who drink this alcohol behaving that way. It's only those who drink that particular alcohol behaves that way. The nurses thought it was a joke at first, but after weeks and weeks of observing this, we realized, there is probably some truth to it. We have a friend, a forensic psychologist who works in Miami, who's a physician as well. I just mentioned it to her by passing, and we also had another internal medicine doctor that also heard what I said, and he was like, Dr. Martin, this is an interesting observation, why don't we talk about this a little bit more? Well, we did. And she said, well, look at how the alcohol is distilled. Look to see where they're storing it. And depending on the container they're storing it, I'm pretty sure there are some heavy metals that are being dissolved into the alcohol. And psychiatrically, we've known that there are certain heavy metals that has a mental issue on people. So say, so done.
Whoa.
That was many years ago. I went to the medical director at the time and I tell him, I got something, I think we could publish this study. I was all excited about publishing the study. Now finally we found some alcohol-related injuries or alcohol-related, and it might be a psychoactive or psychological aspect to that particular alcohol. I was stunned when medical director says, no, we can't do that. And the reason is because of the economic economic fallout that would have happened, not just for the particular brand of alcohol, but for alcohol in its entirety. Subsequently to that, I have also learned of other studies that was done that was looked at impurities in alcohols in the society and what dangers it could do. But the economy is not going to allow this. The society is not going to allow this because of the economic fallout, because of alcohol use and so on. So this is not a very simple topic, and it's sometimes, because of my public health nature, it gets me a little bit emotional about these things, because to me, I'm all about public health prevention. But unfortunately, the society is not going to have it that way.
Whoa. So think about it this way. I mean, let's say, for example, I'm the one buying the alcohol and it's having this effect on my body, and you're the one selling, but you don't want to stop selling. And I'm the one who have to buy the alcohol and pay for my medical expenses. So I guess we could all do the math. I guess we could leave it right there.
Of course.
So I mean, common sense must prevail, because if they wouldn't stop, if I stop buying, then they will have to stop selling.
Right.
But as long as I am buying, they don't have to stop selling.
Yeah.
At the same time, they don't care about what it does to me. And when it comes to even the physiological makeup of human beings, different persons will process this alcohol in different ways.
Yes, people process it different ways. On average, it takes about an hour to process 1 unit of alcohol. But as I said, the human body absorbs alcohol much quicker than we eliminate it.
Right.
So eventually, if you drink fast enough, it's going to build up into your bloodstream, and that is what we were talking about earlier, about the build up of the thing. So 1 unit of alcohol is considered one. So 1 beer is 1 unit, because that's 250 mils. 1 beer is 1 unit. 1 glass of wine is 1 unit. 1 shot of cognac is 1 unit. No, sorry, I don't know how it's a glass. 1 beer is this. 1 glass of wine is about this, and then the cognacs, I think, is a little bit less, but that's also 1 unit. And then the spirits, which are like the very strong drink, 1 shot is considered 1 unit. So all of it is one. It's just that the higher the alcohol content is, the smaller the volume.
Right.
But it is all 1 unit. And it takes 1 hour to metabolize 1 unit. So in other words, if you drink 5 beers in the evening, it takes at least 5 hours to metabolize that 5 beers. So you can actually gauge. So when a man says he takes a drink 15 days last night, you know next day his body is still metabolizing alcohol because it takes an hour to get rid of just one of them. Right? So for those who wishes to drink, that bit of information can help you to know, okay, if I'm hanging with my friends tonight, I have one, I have two, whatever it is. But if you have more than that, you know what's going to happen. So, it is all these kinds of physiological things that people must be aware of if you're going to partake in something like that.
I know in a way some people have alcohol and it is related to their sexual prowess or whatever, but they mix alcohol with those energy drinks because I think some people want to power up quickly, if you want to say that. How dangerous is that?
Alcohol drink an interesting invention, and I can understand why the person invented it because it makes sense for the invention purposes. But it is one of the most dangerous things to play around with.
Right.
Because when you drink alcohol, you feel the effects of the alcohol. And for many people, after feeling the effects of the alcohol, it tells them where to stop. So some people knows they need to stop when they start smiling and laughing and so on.
It's extra.
Right? And some knows that they need to stop when they start feeling the emotional, either the depression or the labile or the sadness or whatever it is. Then some know they need to stop when they start drifting. And some friends know you need to stop when you stop drifting.
Right.
But as it turns out, the energy drink, which most of the time is about caffeine, and I think for most of these drinks is about 30 to 60 milligrams of caffeine that is in one of them, which is pretty significant caffeine. What the caffeine does, it dulls the brain from the effects of the alcohol, the physical effects. But the concentration of alcohol remains the same.
Of course.
So if you drink 2 units of alcohol, the 2 units is in your brain. But if you drink carbonated beverage or caffeine with it, the 2 units of alcohol is in your brain, but the effects that you feel is not the same as 2 units.
Right.
So people like that will tend to tolerate more and more alcohol without feeling the physical effects of it. But the brain is feeling the effect, and the liver is feeling the effect. And remember earlier I talked about the alcohol sinking, going into your brain from the top, then it sinks lower down, where it gets into the emotions, and then lower down when it gets into the drifting part, and then down into your brain stem. And so I have had a personal experience with a cousin of mine who died from drinking alcohol and energy drink because he drank so much. He didn't know he was drinking that much, but it became to a level that in medicine we call it alcohol toxicity.
Right.
So there is a term called alcohol toxicity where you can actually drink enough and poison yourself to death, because the acetaldehyde is actually a poison. And then I've had experiences both on a regional level with friends of mine who have done those energy drinks, and the poison got to a certain level in the body, got too high, and they died because of it.
Wow. In terms of alcohol and women, I noticed that women or girls, young girls even, consume quite a large quantity of alcohol.
Right.
So give us a sense of how it affects women, in particular, how it affects pregnant women.
Women are affected in very much a similar way to men in terms of the hormonal axis that we spoke about earlier. Hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal gland, and the ovaries. And the effects you get there are for the hormonal balance that can happen. Also for the periods that they may have polycystic ovarian syndrome, hormonal imbalances, but it does tend to interfere with the normal period. I am not fully aware of what effects it's actually going to have on the eggs itself, because I think the eggs is already there. Your eggs in you as a woman is put in there to you by your mother, so you don't really need to do anything about it. But the alcohol may affect the physiological relationship as to how the period comes and what have you. But if, God forbid, you get pregnant while being an alcoholic or drinking lots of alcohol, during the first 4 weeks of pregnancy, that's long before you probably even know you're pregnant. Most of the cellular divisions that have taken place to form the major chambers or the major layers that would turn out to be a human being, that's already formed, right? And by the 8th week, which a lot of the times this is the first time you're doing your pregnancy test,
Right.
maybe it's 6 and 8 weeks you're doing your pregnancy test. By the 8th week, all of the organs of a human being has already been formed. So after the sperm hits the egg and that binding have taken place, that process where the cells just rapidly divide to form the layers that are responsible for the baking of a human being, alcohol can significantly affect that process. And so, and of course it depends on how much you have drank or how much exposure you have to drinking. And this is why medicine has a term that is called fetal alcohol syndrome. So alcohol does affect that unborn child. And what is even more important is that during that stage of the development, the child's brain and spinal cord, which end up becoming speaking to the child's intelligence and IQ later on, that part is critical at that point. So if that baby is exposed to alcohol at this early age, it significantly affects the IQ of that baby that you're being born. Interestingly, though we're not talking about it, but I just want to put it in there, is that iron or folic acid is also one of the elements that is absolutely critical for baby's IQ during that early stages. And that's why eating iron or taking your supplements in early pregnancy is so critical. So alcohol and iron content is very critical at that point. And then this is the part about alcohol and pregnancy that worries me the most.
Wow. In terms of, you talked about how alcohol affects our emotions and how it creates certain state based on the degree to which we drink. So let's say you have an issue. Some people say, well, their wife giving them trouble, or they have a battle or confusion at home, they vex, they go down the road and they just drink their troubles away. So that drinking becomes a way of dealing with situation. I mean, fact or myth?
Yeah.
Fact or myth? Does the problem go away?
No, I tend to say fact with a cause or fact with an excuse or something like this. Mm-hmm. The truth is, when people drink and they have attained a certain level of high or effects of the alcohol, their brain do tend to rest for a moment from their troubles. The troubles is not going away.
Right.
But the way I like to look at it is, if a man have an option of sitting and thinking about his troubles for 24 hours of the day as option A, and option B, sitting and thinking of your troubles 20 hours of the day with 5 hours of rest, the man will choose the 5 hours of rest. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for some men, alcohol does give them that 5 hours of rest. Mm-hmm. The problem don't go away. And as a matter of fact, when you get over the alcohol and the problem resurfaces, sometimes it resurfaces you even worse than it was before.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it really doesn't work out better for him. But let's face it, these guys do get a release from the stress for 2 hours, because at that 2 hours, they're not even thinking.
Right.
It's not the best solution. It's not the solution at all. But we just have to be practical. These people are going through real experiences. Because remember, what option is there for him? Does our society have a way to support people who are experiencing psychiatric and psychological disorders? Mm-hmm. We as a society tend to think that depression doesn't exist. We only say it in our mouths. But do we treat people as though depression exists? Do we treat people as though stress exists, and to help people when they go into their stressful situation? So even us as people, we don't encourage people to express themselves, because we think, okay, you must be a man and suck it up.
Yeah, right.
So we have to help them. If you want to get them off the alcohol, we have to provide avenues for them to be able to deal with their stress.
Okay. Fact or myth? Drinking isn't a problem as long as you can hold your liquor.
Oh my goodness. This is such a myth. Yeah, drinking is not a problem as you can hold your liquor. Drinking is addictive, and the effects, the physiological effects, is cumulative, meaning that as you drink, as the years go by and the months go by, the effects pile up on each other. So it is a myth. It affects every organ in your body, your heart, your lung, your liver, your kidney, everywhere, and eventually also affects your erection.
Wine, that should stick up in right there. Wine or beer won't make you as drunk as hard liquor.
All alcohol makes you as drunk depends on your bodily function and how much you drink. So, for example, ladies who naturally have a little bit more fat layer on their skin than men, they tend to get drunker quicker, and they tend to tolerate much less alcohol than men who are much leaner, more muscular. The amount of alcohol or the amount of wine you have to drink to get drunk would be more than the amount of hard liquor you have to drink to get drunk. But the drunkenness is the same thing. And you can't compare my drunkenness to your drunkenness because there are so many different things that interferes with how quickly alcohol is metabolized.
I can drink as much as I want as long as my belly is full. I eat a lot of food and I can drink.
That's a myth as well, because the truth is the body selects alcohol over anything else. So if you eat a bowl of oil down, and a cup of babash, the body will grab the babash first and use the oil down afterwards. So no.
Wow. This has been such a really, really, really mind-blowing experience. Is there a way that we can help persons who have already crossed the I can't drink? Because some people, it seems that they can't help themselves. Right. So can you close by just offering some kind of...
I think on overall, we need a societal understanding and a societal shift that the men in our society and our people in our society who are addicted to alcohol needs support. And the support has to be multifaceted, and many aspects of it need to look at it, starting from the home situations where homes, churches, communities, and a society as a whole. So we need that kind of a support. But ultimately, I think the best thing is probably distraction or giving the men something else that they can do. It's like the mom used to say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. And men are people that was created by God. Men were created to work, whether you want to learn. I mean, lazy guys is another story, but things that you can do to help to take your mind off the situation or the circumstances that lead to you drinking in the first place. And I think that's probably one of the ways we can look at in terms of helping people to get over this problem.
And just before we close, what's about closet drinkers? Because there are some people who don't go out and drink, but they are very much alcoholic as those who might be blocking the drains, but they're at home.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you ended with that, because the most dangerous alcoholics are the closet drinkers. Because the guys out in the open, you with friends, you may drink a lot, but invariably a friend or two might say, okay, I think you had enough, bro. I mean, that's it, but those that are behind the closet, there's no one to tell them anything. And so they could, just go on, and those tend to be a lot more dangerous and also difficult to get over because they do it in silence.
Okay, but there's always an opportunity to change, right?
Of course, change is natural for us as human. We can always change, but we just provide avenues for that to take place. Okay.
Wow, Dr. Martin, thank you so much for this. Wow. Thank you. I'm not usually speechless, but just as we're talking, I'm just thinking about so many things, and I've seen so many men and women, because we have it. Don't fool yourself. Women are very much culprits in this way as well. But I think when it's all said and done, the more we talk about it, the more we educate persons, that might help to get the ball going when it comes to stopping, as people understand the dangers. Maybe that might help them to make the right decision. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and I am going to have you back again, because this conversation is not over, not by a long shot. Viewers and listeners, this has been very interesting discussion as usual with Dr. Francis Martin, who just helping us to understand the importance of understanding the effects of alcohol and how we can make the right choice. Avoiding overconsumption of alcohol might be one of the most important decisions you may have to make or may make in your life in order to save your health. And I'm just want to encourage each and every one of us to begin to think of how dangerous it's almost, I always say, tantamount to putting poison in your mouth. If you know it's going to kill you, then you might want to make a different choice. And hopefully this is the effect this interview has had on you. So thank you so much for joining us. This is our Inside Finance television production, an inside look into the nation's business. Join us again next time. I am Ruth Roberts. Thank you for joining me.